officially anyway. We've had Jeffrey Munn before, but we haven't had just a speaker meeting. So so today I've asked someone that I really admire and whose story I really get a lot out of, and I wanted to share that with all of you. And his name is Ralph Kay. And so yes, so welcome to Ralph, and the floor is yours.
Bright and beautiful morning to you, Brijet. My name is Ralph. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic, and I happen to be atheist and have been since the age of 16 or thereabouts, when I was in high school, introduced to some topics of philosophy and science and the existence of God and so on, and got involved in debate societies as a teenager. And teenagers are prone to that, at least where I grew up in my neck of the world, and discovered Marxism, and I discovered existentialism, and took it to heart. And I have stayed that way from that age on. Never thought about spirituality except in terms of religiosity, and that bugged the heck out of me. I believe I became an alcoholic because I drank too much. And I probably drank too much because I was an alcoholic. It sounds like circular thinking, and it sure is circular thinking. But in any event, there came a time when I wanted to stop drinking, because alcohol was a pleasure, was linked to hedonism and to libido. But when I tried to stop drinking, I was unable to stop drinking. So for the last 10 to 15 years of my life as a drunk, I drank in spite of myself. I drank when I had the serious decision not to drink. When I really did not want to drink, I had absolutely zero desire to drink. I drank nonetheless because I was awake, or because it was Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. I drank for just about any occasion, simply to really to numb the feelings that I had, and of inadequacy, and the feelings of unease and discomfort that I felt. And that became a royal pain in the neck to be that dependent on liquid courage. On I dabbled in other things, but I got rid of them all except for nicotine, which I was addicted to, though I quit smoking about 5 years before I quit drinking. But I stayed hooked on Nicorettes. Nicotine was a drug that I could not rid myself of, and alcohol. And that was a drug of choice. I had an expense account. I was in business, and I spent a copious amounts of money on entertainment on my expense account, entertaining clients. The number one client I had was Ralph. I took him everywhere I went, but I always, put down some names because the insurance commissioner and the IRS and the California State Board of Equalization every once in a while audited our accounts, and they take a look at the padded expense accounts. And I had no boss because I was a partner and a co-owner. So it was all equals basically as shareholders of this firm, which has become successful since. But eventually the time came when I began facing the consequences of my drinking. And I'm just going to share a couple of instances of the insanity, that the level of insanity that I had reached. And one of them was back in the early 80s. I worked in Beverly Hills in a pretty plush part of Los Angeles for 32 years. And at one time in the early 80s, probably 82 or 83, they had a big campaign promoting a French wine that was freshly pressed, brand new wine. They called it Beaujolais Nouveau, new Beaujolais. It was out in fashion, and the restaurants and the bars, all promoted it, and it was like 50% discount on the glass or by the bottle. And so, of course, because it was there and advertised everywhere with bandoliers all over the streets of Rodeo and Beverly, Cannon Drive and stuff. So I took my share. I could not pass it by or ignore it. It was a chance to spend 50% less on. I went with a friend, was one of my associates at work actually, to meet some clients. And I ended up getting drunk that night with the clients there. I remember what I had because I told the story so many times. It was still fresh in my mind back then. I asked for the special of the day, and it happened to be fresh fish, trout, cooked on a bed of rice and with some capers on top, and lots of pilaf and stuff. So I had that as a special, and I drank, of course, the Beaujolais. When I came to that morning, probably was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was in the Beverly Hills jail, in the police jail, and I recognized I was in jail because I was barefoot and I saw the blue uniforms, and I tried to reconstruct what happened, what brought me there. I had a blackout. And all I could remember is that I was in the restaurant, nice plush restaurant on a nice street. And I remember that I was having fish for dinner. And I remember that I drank lots of Beaujolais that night. And it hit me right there and then that my problem was that I had red wine with the fish. That was a big mistake. I figured that because of that, I'm in prison. Because I had red wine with fish, which is a violation of etiquette, culinary etiquette, that I'm supposed to, if I had had white wine, I wouldn't be in jail. I blamed the fish basically for my drunken stupor. And it made perfect sense to me at that time. Another instance that I remember very well, it came to me actually years later, years into my sobriety. A friend of mine, Jerry, who passed away a couple of years ago on August 4th, he told me, remember, Ralph, that one time we were going to walk from Colette, which was a bar that I used to frequent. It was a watering hole right next to our office. He said, remember when we were leaving Colette to go to the Bistro Garden, nice restaurant, to meet some clients. And you said, and it was only 3 blocks away from the office. And he said, remember when you said, let's go ahead, you can walk, I'm too drunk to walk, I'll drive. And so that's what I did. I drove, and then I wondered why I was having so many DUIs. I ended up collecting so many DUIs, unfortunately, that I became deemed to be a repeat offender. And the repeat offender law in California, which goes back to 98, I think, or 99, is pretty severe. I could have ended up in state prison for a number of years, and I could have lost my driving privilege permanently. I know people who have, friends of mine that I have met in the program, who have lost their driving privilege forever because they were repeat offenders. And the judges basically were saying, I'm not going to have blood on my hands because of this jerk. He can't stop drinking and he keeps driving. He's going to kill people and it's going to be on my conscience. And I may even, get recalled or not get reelected as a judge. So lots of judges were throwing the book at drunks who couldn't stop driving or couldn't stop drinking. Eventually, I ended up on August 3rd of 99 was my last drunk. So it's been 22 years since I last had a drink or any mind-altering substance for that matter. And that night was a turning, pivotal night in my life. I went to a restaurant to have dinner with clients and with a couple of associates. And one more time, I have no recollection to this day of how I left the restaurant or when I left the restaurant and got in my car. I don't remember where my car was. I had a brand new Lexus, what they call them, mini SUV, an RX something, probably was RX 300 back then. Only had a couple of thousand miles on it. I had just bought it brand new. And somehow I was driving it on heading toward the San Diego freeway, the 405. And I got into a nasty accident. I hit nobody. I hit a concrete barrier that marked the entrance to a construction site. And needless to say, the construction site won. The barrier won. My car was brought to an abrupt stop, and I had facial lacerations. I had glass all over my head, and I found myself, and somehow I left the car. And when I came to, I was sitting on the sidewalk across the street from where my car was. The car was up in flames, and the fire department and the paramedics were there. The fire department was dosing the car with the foam. And I was standing there shaking my head, sitting, not standing, shaking my head at where the hell I brought myself again, for one more time. And it was not the first or second or third or fourth time, unfortunately. But I was just absolutely desperate. Cop came by on a motorcycle, gave me a field sobriety test, which I flunked royally. He had asked me if I was drinking, and I told him I did. I did drink. And so he handcuffed me, and I sat there waiting for whatever the heck was happening. I was still really unconscious, but most of what I remember is from what I read in the police report, and I had plenty of time to read that. Eventually, a patrol car came and threw me, a man and a woman. They threw me in the back seat of the patrol car and began driving me to jail. And something happened in the back seat of that car. And I think what happened is the result of the accumulation of the continual defeats that I had at my attempts to stop drinking, accumulation of my total exasperation with myself and my total incomprehensible demoralization as a failure in so far as stopping drinking was concerned. I just couldn't do it. And I was just so bloody tired. I was really hoping for death, basically. And what happened in the back seat of that car as I was handcuffed, apparently I turned down medical attention. And even though my chest cavity was in shambles because of the airbags that blew open, but nonetheless, they had the window sills open. It was August 3rd. It was very hot in LA. The window sills were open, and they were driving, and they were talking, and they were saying things. And apparently I was very cooperative and responsive. But I was overcome with a sensation of freedom in that condition, handcuffed and wet from the waist down with what I think was my own urine. I've lost control of my bladder movement for years. Actually, every time I drank, my poor wife had to get me a new pair of trousers. Anyway, I was overcome with a sensation of freedom and of peace and of hope. And the sensation which really comes as a result of the perception of quiet and peace, of the end of hostilities, the cessation of hostilities, not as a truce or an armistice, but as an actual, real, permanent peace once and for all, unconditional. I personally believe that sensation that overcame me, which was pre-reflective, it didn't involve the frontal cortex or the intellectual part of the brain that makes executive decisions. I believe personally that it was a instinct of survival that kicked in at the cellular level, at a very visceral, molecular level. I believe that my bladder cells, or my kidney cells, or my brain cells, or my lung cells were screaming, "You bastard, you're killing us. You son of a bitch, stop it. We can't take it anymore." And I think survival instinct, which some scientists believe that it probably is in that part of the brain, which is very, very primordial, very elemental, and very early in our evolution and in our formation, probably in the hippocampus, that horse-shaped little part of the brain that contains the amygdala, a garbanzo bean or a chickpea-sized little gland that apparently controls flight or fight instincts and reactions to life. It's the one that makes me duck when a rock is coming my way without measuring the distance or the velocity of the rock or the projectile. It makes me duck because it's survival, period. And I think that's what kicked in and made me essentially lose forever the desire to drink, because my body, in spite of my ego, has opted and voted for life as opposed to suicide and death. Suicide that I was committing one glass at a time, one drink at a time. And survival instinct surmounted the obstacle that the ego or the egoic mind was posing on its way to prosperity and to good living. And my friends in AA who are believers, and most of my friends are believers. And when I say believers, I mean believers in the hereafter and in a divinity that is somehow involved in the lives of human beings. They tell me that it was the grace of God that touched you in the back seat of the car. And I tell them that I'm an atheist. I guess the word is a rational or secular humanist. I believe in naturalism. I'm a part of nature, like any bird or any tree or any blade of grass. But you know, whatever we call it, whether it's survival instinct kicking in or the grace of God touching me in the backseat of the car, the fact remains it is a pre-reflective condition that took place. And it's a felt experience that has taken away from me the desire to drink once and for all. I have not felt the desire to drink ever since. That was that powerful of a psychic change that took place. I was sentenced, among other things, to 18 months of AA. I was sentenced to other loss of community service, hundreds of hours of this and that, and drug and alcohol treatment, face-to-face and group meetings, and so on for a couple of years. But I had to do 18 months of AA. I showed up in AA, and I was very belligerent or very reluctant to accept the program. And the truth of the matter is, I had a prejudice against the word God, something that I haven't thought about since I was 16. And by that time, I was 50 years old already. And last thing I had on my mind is to hold hands with strangers and to recite the Lord's Prayer, or to ask for a God to grant me the serenity and all that stuff. So I was prejudiced, and I began judging right away because I was still very defiant. You know, I should tell you that after that experience in the backseat of the police car, the next morning when I came to in jail in the Venice police station, my first thought when I realized where I was, I said, Jesus, why did I take Wilshire Boulevard? I should have taken Pico Boulevard or Olympic, or I should have taken the Canyon, Sepulveda. Everybody knows there are fewer cops there. Yeah, just typical fighting, Don Quixote fighting the windmills. But in any case, I ended up in AA, and in AA, thank goodness for the kindness and the gentle attitude of the women and the men in Alcoholics Anonymous, who, by their example, showed me tolerance and showed me kindness. Eventually, this lady that I was picking up, driving from her assisted living place to AA, I was driving without license for 2 years, by the way, which I don't recommend to anybody. It was absolutely stupid, because if I had gotten caught, not only would I lose that car that I had just stolen from the insurance company, I would also end up 3 years in a state prison. That was the sword of Damocles that was hanging over my head. That was the terms of my probation. But in any event, I had to go to these meetings, and I had to get that court card signed, and I had to have it turned over to the probation officer at the Van Nuys Police Municipal Court. And so I was going reluctantly. This lady that I was giving a ride to was a devout Catholic, a very nice lady, but she was one of those revolutionary people. She, when she was younger, in her early years, she was in New York. She's a Brooklyn native, and she was a wobbly, one of those international workers of the world. She was gung-ho for unions and for human rights and blah, blah, blah. And a wonderful lady, and devoutly Catholic. And she used to try to press these books on me. And I keep telling her that I'm a Marxist. I don't believe in that stuff. But in any event, she told me one time, and she saw that I was very angry with my life, and I was. These were probably the first 4 months of my dry condition were probably the worst months of my life, because I was not drinking, And I had no desire to drink, but I had such an incredible desire to kill everybody and everything around me. Angry, impatient, and you name it, with my wife and with my kids and with my neighbors and with clients and with employees and so on. But she told me, Ralph, and I told her this AA BS doesn't work. And she says, well, for one thing, and I notice you haven't raised your hand to identify as a newcomer. That's number one. And that pissed me off because here I am giving her rights. I say, whose side is she on? Is that how you show gratitude? But that was my thought. I didn't say anything. She was an elder lady. And then she told me what really hit me hard. She said, I'll tell you, the truth is, inside you lives a twin brother. His name is Ralph also, and he knows he's an alcoholic. And you are depriving him of his medicine. She said, one of two things happens to people like you. She says, either they kill themselves, or Ralph will kill you, which is called suicide, masquerade in the form of an accident or whatever. Or more likely, she said, what really happens is we pick up and drink. He will force you to get him a drink. And for us to drink is to die, she said. So I told her, what's the solution? She said, the solution, in my experience, she said, is the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And here I am, 4 months into going to AA. I told her, what steps? I heard them in every meeting where they read chapter 5, including the 12 steps. In this Alano club where I used to go, they had the 12 steps both in English and in Spanish, all over the walls. All I had to, never saw them, never paid attention to them. And I probably did read them, but I didn't remember reading them. So she said the steps will get you out of your mess, because that's what they did to me, she said. And so I thought about that, because I was really fresh out of ideas. And one day I made sure Jean wasn't there to see me raise my hand, because I don't want to be caught wrong. I'd rather be dead than wrong. And I raised my hand. I said, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Ralph. And my life changed 180 degrees. I began taking commitments in meetings. And commitments are, at that time, it was picking up cigarette butts from the parking lot, because it was in a shopping mall, in a shopping center, cleaning the room and the bathrooms of the men and the women, setting up the chairs and the tables, shaking hands at the front door to people coming in, and introducing myself. My name is Ralph, I'm an alcoholic, and starting to care about people. I heard also that in AA, what we learn to do is to listen. We learn to listen so that we can listen to learn. And that stuck with me when I heard that lady say, Ralph, you got to learn to listen so they can listen to learn. And I began to listen to people, not with the left side of the brain, the calculating, the measuring, the comparing, the judging, but with the right side of the brain that takes it in, feelings and all, emotions and pauses and space between the words, and without judging, just to listen to somebody, lend someone a pair of loving ears for the sake of being there and for the sake of listening. And as a result, one day I was sitting in that same Alano club, and some young lady was sharing about her parents or her child or whatever it was, but I choked up and tears were running on my cheeks. So I got up out of embarrassment and walked to the coffee counter. There's a man there called Bob M. I told him, Bob, what the hell is going on? I'm sitting here listening to a stranger talk and I'm crying. And Bob stopped what he was doing, and he came out of the counter and he put his arm around my shoulder and gave me a big squeeze. And he said, Ralph, welcome back to the human race. He said, you are regaining your humanity. You're becoming a human being again, because the shell that the ego built around you, around your persona, that shell that separated you and isolated you in deprivation, sensory deprivation, is cracking open, and you're beginning to heal. He said the tears are the first sign of healing. You're beginning to recover. And that reminded me of a saying my grandfather used to tell, my paternal grandfather who lived with us until he died. He used to say that when the people who are caring for a sick man see him or hear him begin to ask about the well-being of other people, they start singing and dancing, because they know that the recovery has commenced, because that self-pity, which is a drug more potent than heroin, it is finally receding. Self-pity is getting away because it's asking about other people. And that is what in the big book it talks about, and in the evangel, in the holy books of the Christians, they talk about the freedom from the bondage of self that the old carpenter spoke about. That is really what it meant, that I was getting free from the bondage of self, finally, caring about other people. And that took me on a path of service in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was told that it's a program of action. Every single chapter in the book talks about action. There is more action and action and more action. And that's what I got myself involved in. I firmly believe that the structure or the architecture of my neural pathways, the synaptic connections in my brain have changed as a result of my new action, a new way of living. The new way of living has forced me into a new way of thinking, because by repetitive action of showing up, of keeping my commitments, of making the phone calls, of going on panels to prisons and to hospitals and to recovery houses, by picking up folks and dropping them at meetings, by getting involved in the nitty-gritty, the tedious stuff of Alcoholics Anonymous, that repeated action has really shaped a new way of living life for me. It is really an old Marxian or Marxist in social psychology. They say that it is not the consciousness of the individual that shapes the individual's social being. It is rather the individual's social existence that shapes the individual's consciousness. In Alcoholic Anonymous parlance, in our way of speaking in AA, we say that I cannot think myself into a sober way of living. I have to live my life into a sober way of thinking. And that is so absolutely true, because it is the action or matter from which emanates intellect or thought and so on, which is the superstructure that lies above the material organic infrastructure of life. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a fine example of that. I have met lots of alcoholics, believers and non-believers. It doesn't really matter. I always say, yes, of course I'm a believer. I believe that Alcoholics Anonymous works, and I believe I'm a living example of that. Every single day, I'm a happy camper and grateful to be sober and to be alive. Brijet, you're the timer. You probably want to give me a 2-minute warning so I get to shut up when you tell me to.
Yeah, you still have a few minutes.
Okay. The AA has sent me back to revisit, and I retired a year ago. So I got a chance to be of more service in all kinds of things. You know, I'm active in the Homeowners Association where I live. We have one of those planned unit developments, 237 houses in this development, and they have all kinds of committees. So I got a chance to be active in those committees, because I stopped going to bars since August of 1999. I've got involved in all kinds of ventures. I got involved in committees and in support for the Audubon Society. One year I remember, early in my sobriety, I think it was early 2000, I got assigned with a group of other guys to go and count Canadian geese, visiting the Sepulveda watershed. So I got involved in that, and I loved the heck out of it. I got involved in all kinds of things that have to do with the American Civil Liberties Unions, with Amnesty International, in adopting prisoners of conscience in different disparate parts of the world, and got to learn about the social structure of those societies and the various vectorial dynamics between the social classes and so on and so forth. And it gave me a chance to really act on that which I believed in, which as a drunk I didn't get a chance to do. I got to become a general service rep for meetings that I attended. I'll never forget, these experiences, they seem like they're just old hackneyed stuff, but in them, I find gems that reinforce my faith that Alcoholics Anonymous works. I was in a meeting one time as a rep for GSR in the 11th district of Area 5. We used to meet on a Sunday at the area assembly at the middle school, and I was there one time, and we had they guys organized it. They brought a Class B trustee from Alcoholics Anonymous. He happened to be a psychiatrist, a medical doctor from one of the Western states. And he, as a trustee of AA, they sent him to someplace, probably Latvia or Estonia or someplace. This is way back in the 80s, before the Iron Wall fell, or before the Soviet Union dismantled. So he was sent to pick up a manuscript of the first 164 pages of Alcoholics Anonymous, translated from English into that language. And again, I forgot which language it was, whether it was Latvian or Lithuanian or whatever. But they told him, and so he flew in and he took the train. And when he landed there, there's this young lady she was an English school teacher, high school teacher. She met him, she took him to his hotel, and she told him the next day we'll have brunch or breakfast, and I'll give you the manuscript. And then you can leave. And he had an envelope containing $2,000 to give her. That was the deal with General Service Office in New York. So the next day when she came, she gave him the manuscript. It was about 300 or 400 pages of typed paper. And so he gave her he took it. He doesn't read that language. So he gave her the envelope. She said, no, keep your money. He said, she told him, keep your money. He says, no, I can't do that. I'm supposed to pay you because you did some work for us for over a year and you got to be paid for your work. We don't work for nothing. She says, yeah, I've been paid over already. He said, how is that? She said, I live here in this town, whatever the town it was. She said, I live with my sister. My sister and my brother-in-law, they live here, so I'm living with them and sleeping on the couch while I teach during the school year. She said, and my brother-in-law is a drunk. He used to come home and beat the heck out of my sister. And sometimes he comes home with some of his co-workers and they scream and yell and he's fighting with my sister and beating her all the time. She said, as I was typing, I said, one time I forgot to fold the file and take the papers with me. I left them on the desk. Says, when I came home, he was there. Came home from school. He was there from work and he was sitting with she only had translated the first two chapters, the Doctor's Opinion and Bill's story. And she said he was reading that and he began yelling at me. He says, are you writing a book about me? He told her. And she says, no. She said, I'm not writing a book at all. I'm translating an American book for some people in America, in New York. I'm translating it into our language. It's not about you. And so he didn't believe. So she showed him the 164 pages, the big book. She said, that's what I'm translating into our language. And he said, oh, okay. He ended up believing her. But on the other hand, she said, he also stopped drinking as a result of having read just those two, the Doctor's Opinion and Bill's story. And she said, he has stopped drinking and he began reading everything that I translate. And he said he's bringing some of his buddies also after work, and they sit here and they drink coffee and eat some cookies and have dinner together, and they're not drinking at all. She said, for the last year, my sister stopped being beaten by her husband. And she said, he said, there is no price you can put on that. You can keep your money. Tell the guys in America that we've been paid already. So, to me, that is a spiritual experience. That's the extent of my spirituality, is feeling what other people have gone through, what other people have felt. And I find that to be fascinating. I'm going to finish with a quote that I copied from a Little Gidding of T.S. Eliot, of all people. Now, he, toward the end of the fourth quartet, he says, we shall not cease from exploration. Talking about step 10 now. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. This is what the inventory did to this guy, to me. Get to know Ralph for the first time through the unknown and unnumbered gate when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. That is really the incredible amount of discovery that Alcoholics Anonymous can do, or has done to this human being at the age of 50. After 50 years, 32 years of drinking, it gave me a chance to get to know who the hell Ralph is as a Homo sapien. Thank you all for being here. You make my life worthwhile. And I'm sober because of you folks. Thank you, Brijet.
Thanks so much, Ralph. Great to hear your story again. And I always enjoy that.